Yo, thank you, FANdation. We are back with another recap of our favorite, stay the F out of my mind, show, FANdation. I'm your host, Anthony, and I'll do my best to be your guide in this far-out show as we're picking up where episode 5 ended, where we see Gaal, Salvor, and Harry on the planet Ignus after having their first encounter with the Mentallics in their efforts to create the second FANdation. This episode is titled, Why the Gods Made Wine, which we learn is a cool line from the show explaining that wine was created for people who couldn't get revenge after they'd been wronged. And this episode has a whole lot of revenge and not a lot of wine. Like, seriously, things are popping off for our characters in this episode, and the only one getting drunk is Polli. But first, do me a favor. If you're new here, please consider giving this channel a like and subscribe to keep up with our weekly FANdation analyses and breakdowns. I see that these videos are getting now close to 1,000 views. I can't tell you how much I'm touched, how grateful I am for everyone to allow me your time. I know how valuable that is. I would really appreciate, before you go on to your next video, hit that like button. The videos are getting several hundred views, but maybe like 100 likes. Please hit that like button, please. YouTube still uses this to help smaller channels like me to grow even in 2023. Please like, subscribe, turn on notifications, do the whole thing. This way you can join us every week as we try to figure out the mystery of FANdation. I really appreciate it. Thank you. This episode opens with Harry White looking a lot like Harry Black as he's standing on a beach reminiscing about what looks like a stampede. Salvor meets up with Harry and talks a bit about how she can't sleep because of weird dreams she's having, and she decides to go for a walk. Salvor meets up with one of the younger X-Men who question if she's always up before sunrise. Now, this little guy is interesting because he has a pretty gnarly scar on his neck. The way that Bond explained it last episode, these Mentallics are hunted and feared for being different, and this dude has got the scar as a parting gift for the fine folks of his home planet. He then shows off his ability to project his voice into the minds of others, and it's a neat trick that he says that they refer to as unvoicing. Salvor plays it cool, but is clearly curious about how this whole thing works. The little boy explains how Bond taught them to use music to fix them and train them to unvoice. He also explained that he can show Salvor how he got his scar, and we're treated to a flashback of the little boy back on his home planet, going through some street surgery because he was able to read the minds of others. We also see that Bond seemed to have saved this little boy's life as he was laid bleeding out at the bottom of a ditch. Hey, didn't Bond say that she used her powers like a lighthouse to bring Mentallics to her? This looks like she went out to get that boy. We then switch to see Salvor and Professor X walking through the Mentallics camp. Salvor mentions how quiet it is, but Professor X here explains that they're actually having a large conversation, except that the whole thing is unvoiced. We then see a trippy montage showing how Bond saved a lot of Mentallics herself, appearing before them during their greatest moment of need. We then switch to Bond speaking with Harry, Salvor, and Gaal in the altar room in which we first met this group. Talks a bit about how the Mentallics are treated differently and reiterates that the Mentallics are on this planet in order to keep to themselves. Harry tries to explain that they need Bond's help, with flexing how she knows everything about Harry's little plan about the FANdation, psychohistory, and even admit that she's been reading all the details right out of Gaal's mind. And clearly these people don't know boundaries. Even the real X-Men will ask, or at least, talk about how they're going to read your mind before they do it. Gaal, Salvor, and Harry don't even get that. Heck, I feel violated for them. Bond pretty much tells Harry that she's disinterested in this whole war with Empire, and lets Harry know that they will not be his army. Harry explains to that she may want to rethink that stance, and lets her know about how the mule is going to give Mentallics a really bad name about 150 years from now in the future. Tellenbaum is skeptical about Gaal's ability to see the future, and they offer to let Tellem read Gaal's mind to prove that she's telling the truth. Tellem gets a small glimpse of what Gaal saw and is clearly bothered by what she saw, and even walks off for a little bit to compose herself without saying a word. Gaal follows and is able to get Tellem to admit that she believes what Gaal saw was true, but she's also concerned about Salvor's fate in this environment. They talk about how Gaal is determined to save Salvor's life, but Tellem is skeptical about the future vision, as she claims that this vision is shaped by Harry's perception and warns Gaal not to accept an inescapable future. Tellenbaum seems pretty skeptical about what Harry is offering as the future and suggests that Gaal hone her abilities to make her own perspective. And she tells Gaal again that this isn't her fight. Oh, and by the way, today is that daughter of yours' birthday, just in case you didn't know. And then Mike drops out of the room, leaving Gaal alone to process everything that she just heard and everything that just happened. We then switch to Brother Constant coming out of that hypersleep. And it's right when she arrives on Trantor as a diplomat on behalf of the Foundation. Brother Constant and one of the spacers have an interesting conversation, with Brother Constant asking her to share her name, and she shares it as she shines brightly. And it gives a little bit of insight about their genetic development. Polli also wakes up around this time and flexes his intelligence a bit when he shares how Trantor is not the literal center of the galaxy, and how that distinction belongs to a black hole. We then see Brother Constant and Polli walking through the processing center. Polli walks through their scanner and definitely sets off a red flag in the scanners, but for some reason, they provide him with a provisional visa regardless of his scan results. We then switch back to the planet Ignus, with Salvor and Harry having a conversation on a beach, with Harry White having a moment about having his toes in the water. Well, about having toes again, but they are in water. They talk for a bit as Salvor starts asking some very valid questions. Why does Harry have toes again? He was immortal as a digital backup, so why did Kali put Harry in a cloned body? Harry assumed that the purpose was so Harry would have a better story to the people who worship him, as he died and was resurrected. But Salvor points out that my guy Harry already had a resurrection back on Terminus when Harry Black walked out of the vault. Harry then gives in and asks Salvor what she thinks, and her theory is that someone wanted Harry to have some skin in the game, and putting him in a body is a perfect way to give him something to fight for. Coincidentally, having a body again also makes Harry susceptible to the Mentallics. Coincidentally. They talk some more, with Salvor admitting that she doesn't want Gaal to basically lose touch with humanity the way that people claim Harry has. Harry admits that he had no idea about Gaal and Raish's relationship until that night. Now, this is very, very interesting because it's been all but obvious that Gaal's relationship with Raish was not part of Harry's plan. But Harry reminds us again that Raish knew everything. Meaning, Raish knew that Gaal was intended to create the first Foundation, and that he was supposed to be placed in the cryosleep instead. Meaning, Raish always knew that there was no chance for him and Gaal to be together, but Raish moved forward with that relationship anyway. Raish's actions that day have had an incredible impact on the happenings of today, with Salvor's very existence being a byproduct of Raish's actions. I can't help but wonder, what else is part of the plan that we haven't learned about yet? What other fallout will there be as a result of Raish altering the plan and pursuing his relationship with Gaal? And also, how much did Raish know? Meaning, how smart was he? Was he Harry Seldon smart that he could possibly figure out how his actions would alter the plan? Could this all be possibly part of Raish's plan? Hold that thought in the back of your mind. Harry reassures Salvor that Gaal will never become Harry because she cares too much about what Salvor thinks of her. And yo, did I tell you I am really liking Gaal's maternal instincts and relationship with Salvor? It's so weird, but so good. We then switch to Gaal back on the spaceship and getting a visit from Talon, with flexing her ability to unvoice into Gaal's mind. They begin talking a bit more, with Talon sharing that she has a couple of ships on her planet and shares how she uses them to occasionally reach out and save some sighted. But she declines Gaal's suggestion to allow her and her team to improve things on Ignus with better technology. Talon doesn't seem to be completely against the idea and points out that her issue really is that she doesn't want any parts of Harry Seldon. Talon then starts telling Gaal that she's really just interested in her, and then flexes on Gaal by throwing water at her and showing Gaal some Mentallic illusions. The act of throwing water at Gaal's face immediately transported Gaal's mind back to her home planet, Synax. But she tells Gaal that Gaal's mind felt that she flung herself into the water rather than the water being thrown at her. Talon then starts explaining how some of her illusions work, but throughout all of this, Talon keeps doing this weird teleporting thing where she just disappears and reappears around the room. She then shows off how powerful she is by using that scary voice of hers to make Gaal pick up a metal pipe, and as she's trying to swing it, she shows that Gaal not only can't swing it, but Talon is in full control. As Gaal is frozen, Talon further explains that when Gaal looked into the future and came back with bruises, that the mule didn't choke her from the future, but rather it was Gaal's mind forcing the blood vessels to pop in her neck because the illusion of traveling to the future was just so powerful in her mind. Then Gaal shocks the hell out of all of us when she uses some Jean Grey telekinesis and pushes Talon back, breaking her hold over Gaal. And yo, I told you they was the X-Men. Talon is surprised by how quickly Gaal is picking up her powers and warns Gaal that Harry is likely exploiting Gaal's desire to please other people. Talon then offers Gaal the option to create the second FANdation on Ignus and to train Gaal on how to use her powers, but only if Gaal moves forward with creating the FANdation without Harry's involvement. We then switch to Hober Mallow? Oh snap, Hober, my guy! He left Terminus on Polli's jump ship, and it looks like he's arriving at the location that Harry Black sent him to as part of Harry's plan for the first FANdation. The location he's arrived at is an empty space. Nothing's there. But shortly after Hober arrives, a huge ship decloaks and appears right before Hober, and we all learn that this is the assignment. We then switch back to Harry White and Salvor both fishing at that beach they were sitting on earlier. Salvor doesn't like sitting still, and she and Harry begin talking about the first FANdation. Harry White realizes that Salvor is worried for the first FANdation as they're about to head into their second crisis. While they're preparing for a third, Harry White explains that the second FANdation will help prod and guide the first FANdation's future, with Salvor wondering why Harry Black in the vault won't prod them on his own. Harry White explains that he edited Harry Black's fundamental knowledge and that Harry Black only knows part of the plan. Salvor points out that Harry Black is still very, very smart, so what's stopping him from figuring out the rest of the plan that Harry White is withholding? Salvor correctly guesses that Harry Black is never supposed to know about Harry White's existence, but Harry White absolutely needs to make sure he monitors what Harry Black is doing. Salvor then flexes her intelligence when she figures out that the Prime Radiant is a way for Harry White to spy on Harry Black because of the quantum nature of the Prime Radiant allows it to be in two places at once. And quantum? Right at that moment, Gaal and Talon show up, with Gaal explaining to Harry that the Mentallics will only follow one of their own. And if he really believes in the second FANdation, then he should let Gaal lead it. Harry doesn't even acknowledge that idea and instead focuses on how Gaal shouldn't trust Talon at all. Harry is all like, "This woman can put thoughts in your head!" And you know, after those stunts she pulled on Salvor's ship and the fact that she's low-key searching for the Prime Radiant herself, I don't really blame Harry for having his guard up. Tellum then starts fucking with Harry when she asks what happened on Mikado Mesa in Halicon when he was a young man. And wait, who? Mikado Mesa? She saw the 3-toed marks in the dust and yo, what the F? Tellum starts showing off her sinister side again when she's heard enough talking from Harry and starts screwing with his thoughts mid-sentence, with Harry arguing that Tellum can't be trusted since she has the ability to control your mind. Harry continued getting frustrated and just stormed off, and Gaal was standing there saying absolutely nothing, or doesn't seem to be caring at all. And yo, did Tellum just do that? Tellum is really out here like the evil Professor X. Like, why is she like this? Why does she want Harry gone and Gaal to stay? My spider sense is tingling on high alert. Hold that thought for a while, because we then switch to Polli and Brother Constant headed home after a night on these Trantor streets. Polli has clearly been drinking and is like 2 seconds away from getting another needle to the foot, but Polli wisely distracts Constant with their incredible view from their hotel. Constant and Polli talk for a bit while enjoying the view when Polli mentions that he has some nose candy in this pocket and wants Constant to do him a favor. Go ahead and flush that down the toilet for me, as he believes his drunk and addict days are behind him now after having wine from the hands of Harry Seldon. That, you know, if you actually remember, he didn't actually drink the wine, but whatever. But he's feeling good. He's feeling really good. Brother Constant then talks about how her father was also moved by Harry Black's presence. And Polli remarks how Constant's faith is purer than his. He says this because Polli actually saw Harry at the creation of the first FANdation over 100 years ago. But Constant is following by just faith and secondhand stories. And yo, this scene right here, yo, my guy Polli is acting his ass off right here. Colvinder Gear, I see you, my guy. Unfortunately, so do the forces of Empire, as they quietly crash into Polly's room without so much as making a sound, with the lady that checked in Constant and Polli earlier in the episode now looking kind of like Che Guevara-ish with the leather beret and goons. They then seem to force Polli to put on a Power Rangers helmet, and we switch to Brother Day. Oh snaps, yo, I feel like we haven't seen Brother Day in forever. He's back, and he's doing that thing he likes to do and hear himself talk in front of a large audience. We see him walking in front of a large stadium of people, and he starts monologuing about how they used to use this arena for battle and for sport. He talks a bit about how Cleon the First's mother was so important, and he decides to use this moment to honor her. And then he unveils a humongous statue of Cleon the First's mother, and how this statue will be a testament to her. And this feels like a big grand gesture, confirming the end of the genetic dynasty. Brother Day then introduces Sarah as his bride-to-be in front of the whole galaxy and calls her the new Empress. The crowd applauses as Day goes in for the kiss, and she gives him the cheek. Yo, the shade in front of everybody. I'm not the only person who saw that, right? Demerzel does something weird in this moment too. Most of the time when she's standing, she has her hands, firmly placed on her tummy. But in this moment, we actually see her reach for like a bracelet. But why? It's an interesting looking bracelet with 2 sharp pointy fangs and what looks like a little paintbrush hanging from the tips. But WTF, what is that? Has Demerzel been wearing jewelry this whole time? Yo, I don't even remember her wearing earrings in her head, but she's been rocking this bracelet the whole time? Brother Dust makes a smart remark about how the party's over when Sareth, behind Day's back, addresses the public directly. It seems like a surprise to absolutely everyone, and if looks could kill, then Brother Day would be holding her head in his hand. Just the absolute subtle outrage that Lee Pace is delivering In this quiet moment, she vows to the public that they will serve the people and make a promise to them that gets the crowd going. And this is definitely a problem, as Sareth is charming as what? And it's clearly, she's a problem. She has the potential to win the affection of the general public as she steps into her role as Empress. And like I said, this would be a big problem for Brother Day, as this would, A, mess with Brother Day's ego. Ruffling those feathers. Day just seems like someone who loves to be the center of attention. So having competition in that sense would be new and unfamiliar territory for Day. I can't imagine how he might try to navigate his way through this. Put Sareth in a position where she might be more well-liked by the general public than the Brother Day and Empire. Who thought this was a good idea? Day wisely puts on a united front with Sareth in front of the public, but doesn't get the look of approval from Demerzel that it looked like he was looking for. And actually, she's looking really annoyed right about now, and even gives a little disapproving head nod at the end. We then switch back to Hober Mallow, who is now somehow inside that massive spaceship that appeared in front of him earlier in the episode. He's wandering around this empty room of pulsating lights and sounds, and somehow ends up in an area that looks like, I don't know, a giant honeycomb? The multiverse? I don't know, it's a room with a lot of doors. Something weird is going on because there are people floating around looking like they're robotic angels. And then we find out that these are the Spacers, and this is their home swarm. We then switch back to Harry White and Salvor, with Salvor berating Harry for walking off when they were talking earlier with Tell. Am I the only person who is getting a little dizzy in this scene? Like, there's definitely something going on at this moment, and Harry confirmed things are off when he tells Salvor about how he had been thinking about the memory that Tellum brought up earlier. And the reason why is because she was combing through his mind all throughout the day in order to find something to use against Harry when the opportunity came. And she did. Harry even says the moment he made landfall, he knew it was going to slip away from him. And it feels like Harry's mind is under attack right now, as he's still off with his speech, and he seems to be struggling to form his sentences. Harry then tells Salvor that they're after the Prime Radiant, and he tells her she needs to protect it at all costs. Before he walks off again, we then see Salvor meeting up with Gaal acting somewhat sus, just a little bit. Gaal plays coy at first, but then she turns around and hands Salvor a piece of fruit and tells her, "Happy birthday!" After, learning earlier that today was Salvor's birthday. Salvor is happy to receive the gift, and they talk a bit as mother and daughter, and definitely, I'm not crying. I'm not. We then hear the sound of a spaceship taking off, and Salvor and Gaal run out just in time to see Harry taking off in Salvor's ship and leaving the planet Ignus. We then switch to see some weird cliffs against the water, and we find that Harry is actually imprisoned by Tellum Bond. Like, he's chained to something straight out of Survivor Australia, and is tasked with seeing how long he can survive in this pool of water as the tide comes in and rises over his head. Tellum then begins her supervillain monologue and tells Harry her entire plan and brags about how Salvor and Gaal are watching a fake Harry fly off right now, and that she intends to destroy the Prime Radiant. Harry takes this moment to ask about the conversation they were having earlier, and how Harry walked away mid-conversation. Tellum admitting that she influenced Harry with her powers in order to get him to act out of character. They go back and forth a bit, with Tellum continuing to brag about how she will mentor Gaal and Salvor moving forward, with Harry in a really bad situation right now as the tide begins to rise, and Harry's beginning to drown. We then switch to a young Harry, whom we saw in prior episodes living with his mother and father. This is like little kid Harry. We see Harry studying these crazy-looking cattle bats on his iPad and we see young Harry do the craziest thing and just walk out into the path of these cattle bats as they're stampeding toward a nearby cliff, where they spread their wings and fly toward the moon. Harry is able to safely walk in the middle of these stampeding creatures and somehow doesn't get trampled, with his mother freaking all the way out as she sees what he's doing. Harry then explains to her that he studied their pattern and figured out a way to navigate through the creatures and their path safely. Harry's mom is confused, but Dad is also there, and I will say this about Dad. He's a man of few words, if you know what I mean. He likes to solve problems the old-fashioned way, and he slaps the crap out of young Harry. We then see a somewhat older Harry Seldon, and I have to say somewhat because the only way we know that this Harry is different is because of his clean-shaven face and his Beatles haircut. We find out that this is Harry when he was working at some university when he was younger, and he's getting approached by a Dr. Taj, who is trying to talk to Harry about his latest paper that he's written that he describes predicting the future, and she tries to deter him from pissing off Empire. The conversation gets heated between the two, with Harry even blurting out if she thinks what he's doing is treason. They then get interrupted by a Dr. Yana Klein, who is arriving to the school after transferring from Calder University, where she specializes in probabilistic analysis and data visualization. And yo, this is starting to make some sense. We see Yana make herself at home and volunteers Harry to share his office with her, and immediately she begins making changes that brighten up his life, including opening the blinds. She also lets Dr. Taj know that Harry's theory isn't a cause of concern and helps shoo her away. We then see Harry and Yana sitting and having the saddest picnic I've ever seen as they sit on a rock with a blanket, no food, and Harry is struggling to spit some game to Yana. Thankfully, Yana shows Harry some mercy and lets her know that yes, she is single, and yes, she is open to dating if he steps his game up. We then see that Dr. Tej suspiciously talking to some mysterious figure on the staircase of the university. Harry sees this but rushes off without being seen. We then see Harry meeting up with Yana in their office or their apartment, one of the two, and pulls out what can only be Prime Radiant Mark I, a prototype of the more polished version that we're used to seeing. We also see that at this point, Harry and Yana aren't idle as they kiss to celebrate. They also confirm things when Yana, in her own scientific way, shows Harry that she's 2 months pregnant with their baby girl and gifts Harry with a necklace that seems to track the heartbeats of both Yana and the baby. We then switch to see young Harry walking up the familiar steps of the university, but then gets into a very loud argument with Dr. Taj in the hallway. Dr. Taj is here to let Harry and Yana know that they've been invited to transition their academic studies in psychohistory to Streeling University on Trantor. Harry is absolutely against this, but Dr. Taj is persistent and isn't really interested in taking no for an answer. Yana isn't stupid and figures out that Dr. Taj is under strict orders to bring in either Harry Seldon, his device, or she ends up unalive. Harry is cold and callous about the whole thing and just goes, she's made her choice, with Yana being the voice of reason and telling him that he needs to get his head from up his ass and take this situation seriously. She argues with Harry that going to Streeling University is probably the best thing for them. They can continue their work right under the nose of Empire, and that it's also a good tactical position to take them down. And wait, they're already plotting to take down Empire? Really? Now? When did that start? Yana continues arguing for Harry to go to Trantor, and he's adamantly against it. Yana walks off in frustration and advises Harry to hide the Prime Radiant really, really well. We then see Yana later that night get a knock at the door with Dr. Taj standing on the other side, holding a gun and telling Yana to come with her. We then see Harry walking up the stairs of the school or the apartment into his apartment, looking for Yana, but as he walks into their home, the device that Yana gave him earlier stops beating. We then see Harry walking toward a car to meet up with Dr. Taj, and apparently they've set up some sort of exchange for Harry to hand over the Prime Radiant prototype, and in return, he's going to be reunited with Yana. Harry gets into Dr. Taj's car, where she shows Harry a hologram of Yana to prove that Yana is alive. And, of course, the deal is still on. Harry hands something over to Dr. Taj, but as they begin to move, Harry reveals to her that he knows Yana is no longer alive. And the package he handed her is just a rock. It's not the prototype that she was asking for. Harry is emotionally off as he tells Dr. Taj about how he knows Yana is no longer alive, and neither is their unborn child. We then see Dr. Taj and Harry walking through an open field, with Harry taking lead and explaining out how it is he knows that Yana is no longer alive. And he even shows Dr. Taj that necklace that he was given that was tracking her and the baby's heartbeat, telling her that it stopped beating right before he received Dr. Taj's ultimatum the night before. Dr. Taj is shooketh, and I'm shooketh for her, so she pulls out her gun and points it at Harry, who just patiently tells her that he had already hacked the trigger. Dr. Taj at this point begins pleading with Harry and tries explaining that Yana's passing was an accident. But Harry ain't with the shit, and I wouldn't be either. Harry then activates some machines that he refers to as sheepdogs without any explanation. Dr. Taj continues pleading terribly, with Harry pointing holes at her BS story. And it's at that point Dr. Taj recognizes the sound of the stampeding moonstrikes. Harry holds her in place as they stand in the path of the stampede. And as the animals begin running, he shoves her into their path as he effortlessly begins walking between the animals just the way he did as a small child. And my goodness, the writing. I love this. I love this. We then see an older Harry Seldon making his way into his new accommodations at Streeling University's library, and is handed a book, Gort Tarker of Kaldor, which Harry states is a recommendation from a friend. We then finally switch back to present-day Harry, chained up to these pillars as the water is rising, and he's absolutely struggling to breathe right now, as the water is rising higher and higher. In these moments, we also see Harry having flashbacks to those final moments with Yana, as we see what looks like Harry drawing his last breath as the water finally overtakes him, and end credits. And yo, did they just take Harry out again? It's so cool to finally learn the history of psychohistory with Harry and his partner Yana. And man, oh man, their little girl. They would have had a little girl. And it's not at all lost on me on why he is the way he is with Gaal. Gaal is absolutely the daughter he never had, with Gaal and Salvor now fulfilling their role of Harry's surrogate family. But more than what's happening with our trip on Ignus, we also have our boy Holbert Mallow seemingly walking into a Borg cube or honeycomb of the Spacers and talking to what looks like their leader. Oh, and speaking of leader, we have Brother Day introducing Queen Sareth to a crowd, and Sareth just outright upstaged him on the grandest stage possible. Plus, Brother Constant and Polli were arrested the same day they arrived on Trantor, so there's a lot of stuff at play here. But still, what did you think about poor Harry? I'm actually starting to feel sorry for my guy. First, he had to learn to fight from his dad, and now he's getting bullied in the mind by Talon Bond. Things are just going from bad to worse now that he's got a new body. Are you all as excited for this next episode as I am? Let me know what you think about this episode in the comments. And before you go, please, 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 hit the like button. I would love if you also subscribe, but if you choose not to, I get it. But at least, please, hit the like button before you go. It's a small ask that helps me in big ways, but thank you again, FANdation. I'm looking forward to catching up again next Friday. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to check you all later. Peace.